What if I told you that after 60, your body is not losing muscle, it is being starved of the one signal it needs to keep building it? Not from lack of exercise, not from age itself, from a missing nutritional trigger that almost no doctor explains in a 5-minute appointment. And the strange part is, the trigger is not protein. It is not creatine. It is not anything sitting in a supplement aisle. It is something growing on trees, sitting quietly in produce sections, completely overlooked, 10 specific fruits, each one switching on a different piece of the muscle-building machinery that slows down after 60. And by the end of this, you will understand exactly why your muscles stopped responding and what it actually takes to make them respond again. Here is the belief almost everyone over 60 carries without question. Muscle loss after 60 is inevitable. It is just aging. Eat more protein, lift some weights, accept the decline. That belief is not entirely false, but it is dangerously incomplete, because the real story is not that your muscles lost the ability to grow. It is that your muscles became deaf to the signals that used to make them grow. There is a name for this in clinical research. It is called anabolic resistance. And once you understand it, everything about nutrition after 60 changes. Here is what anabolic resistance actually means. In your 20s and 30s, a modest amount of protein was enough to flip the switch that tells your muscle fibers to repair and rebuild. That switch is called TOR, the master regulator of muscle protein synthesis. But after 60, that same modest amount of protein barely moves the needle. Your muscles need a much larger, much more concentrated signal to trigger the same response. Think of it like a smoke detector that used to go off at the faintest whiff of smoke. Now it needs a roaring fire before it reacts at all. This is why so many older adults eat what looks like plenty of protein and still keep losing muscle. The detector is not broken. It just needs something stronger to set it off, and that is exactly where fruit enters this story in a way nobody expects. Most people assume fruit is irrelevant to muscle. Fruit is for vitamin C, for fiber, maybe for dessert. But that assumption is about to collapse, because certain fruits contain compounds that do something protein alone cannot do. They do not just provide raw material for muscle. They unlock the door that lets the raw material in. Let us start with the first one, because it sets up everything that follows. Watermelon, strange first choice, I know. But watermelon is one of the richest natural sources of an amino acid called L-citrulline. And L-citrulline does something remarkable inside your blood vessels. It converts into nitric oxide, which relaxes and widens blood vessels, a process called vasodilation. Here is why that matters more after 60 than at any other point in life. As we age, blood flow to muscle tissue declines, partly because blood vessels stiffen and become less responsive. Less blood flow means less delivery of amino acids, oxygen, and nutrients to the very muscle fibers you are trying to rebuild. You could eat a steak the size of your plate, but if the delivery truck cannot get through, the muscle never receives the shipment. Watermelon, through citrulline, reopens the delivery route. Studies on older adults supplementing with citrulline have shown measurable improvements in muscle strength and reduced muscle soreness after exercise. But here is what most people do not realize. The citrulline concentration is highest in the white rind, the part almost everyone throws away. Blending the rind into a smoothie, or simply eating closer to it, multiplies the effect most people never even access. And that is just fruit number one, because the second fruit on this list works through a mechanism so different, it almost feels like it belongs in a different conversation entirely. Pomegranate. Inside pomegranate is a compound called urolithin A, or more precisely, a precursor your gut bacteria convert into urolithin A, and urolithin A has become one of the most studied compounds in aging muscle research over the past decade. Here is why it matters. Your muscle cells contain mitochondria, the tiny engines that produce the energy your muscles need to contract, repair, and grow. As you age, damaged mitochondria accumulate inside muscle cells instead of being cleared out. This buildup of damaged cellular machinery is one of the central drivers of age-related muscle decline, known scientifically as sarcopenia. Urolithin A activates a process called mitophagy, your body's internal cleanup crew that identifies and removes those damaged mitochondria, making room for fresh, functional ones. In a randomized clinical trial published in Nature Metabolism, older adults who received urolithin A showed significant improvements in muscle endurance within just a few months. But here is the twist almost nobody tells you. Not everyone's gut bacteria can efficiently convert pomegranate compounds into urolithin A. Roughly a third of people are poor converters, which means the health of your gut microbiome directly determines how much muscle benefit you extract from this single fruit, a connection between gut and muscle that most nutrition advice completely ignores. And this is where it gets interesting because the next fruit actually helps fix that gut problem. Kiwi. Small, unassuming. Often overlooked, kiwi contains a unique digestive enzyme called actinidin. Actinidin breaks down protein more efficiently than your stomach acid alone, meaning when you eat kiwi alongside a protein source, you absorb significantly more of the amino acids from that protein. In a study comparing protein digestion with and without kiwi, researchers found a measurable increase in amino acid absorption when kiwi was included for someone in their 60s or 70s whose stomach acid production has often already declined. This matters enormously. You are not just eating protein, you are determining how much of that protein actually becomes available to your muscles, and kiwi quietly tips that equation in your favor. But protein absorption is only half the equation, because even perfectly absorbed amino acids are useless if chronic inflammation is actively breaking muscle down faster than it can be rebuilt. And this is where the fourth fruit changes the entire conversation: tart cherries. Specifically Montmorency tart cherries, one of the most concentrated natural sources of anthocyanins, the deep red pigments responsible for their color. These anthocyanins are powerful anti-inflammatory compounds. And here is what most people never connect. After 60, your body exists in a state researchers call inflammaging. A low-grade, chronic inflammation that quietly accelerates muscle breakdown even when you are not sick or injured. This is not the dramatic inflammation of a sprained ankle. It is a slow, constant simmer that tips the balance of your body away from building muscle and toward breaking it down. Tart cherry juice has been shown in multiple studies to reduce key inflammatory markers and significantly speed muscle recovery after exercise in older adults. Athletes have used tart cherry for years to reduce soreness, but the application for aging muscle is even more important because it is not just about soreness, it is about shifting your entire metabolic environment from breakdown to repair. But here is what most people still miss, even after hearing all of this. None of these fruits work in isolation the way supplements do. They work because of timing, and that brings us to fruit number 5. Bananas, dismissed by almost every modern diet trend as just sugar. But bananas contain something most people never think about: resistant starch, along with a meaningful dose of potassium. And potassium plays a role in muscle function that goes far beyond what most people realize. Potassium is essential for the electrical signals that tell your muscle fibers to contract. Low potassium common in older adults due to medication use and reduced dietary intake leads to measurable declines in muscle strength and increased cramping. A single banana eaten before resistance training has been shown to improve electrolyte balance during exercise, supporting stronger, more complete muscle contractions, which is precisely the mechanical stimulus your muscles need to trigger growth. Without strong contractions, even perfect nutrition cannot force adaptation. The muscle has to be asked to work before it will agree to grow. And that brings us to a fruit that almost never appears on muscle-building lists, but should: avocado. Yes, technically a fruit, and one of the most important on this entire list. Avocado is rich in monounsaturated fats, but more specifically, it supports the absorption of fat-soluble vitamins, particularly vitamin D and vitamin K, and vitamin D deficiency, astonishingly common in adults over 60, is directly linked to impaired muscle protein synthesis. Vitamin D receptors exist directly on muscle tissue. When vitamin D is low, those receptors go unused, and the muscle-building signal weakens regardless of how much protein you consume. Eating avocado alongside vitamin D-containing foods, or simply alongside sensible sun exposure, meaningfully improves how much of that vitamin D actually reaches your bloodstream and your muscle receptors. It is a quiet multiplier sitting in plain sight. But here is where this story takes its most surprising turn yet, because the next fruit does something almost no one expects food to do. It directly interferes with the molecular pathway responsible for muscle breakdown. Blueberries, specifically wild blueberries, which carry a significantly higher concentration of anthocyanins than cultivated varieties. Research has shown that blueberry compounds can suppress the activity of a pathway called the ubiquitin proteasome system, the cellular machinery primarily responsible for breaking down and clearing out muscle proteins. In other words, while other fruits are helping you build muscle, blueberries are simultaneously slowing the rate at which existing muscle gets dismantled. Building and breaking down are happening constantly, every single day, in every muscle in your body. Muscle growth is not just about pushing the building side harder. It is about tilting the entire balance, and blueberries tilt it from the breakdown side, working in the opposite direction from everything else on this list. Two strategies converging on the same outcome through completely different doors. Now let us talk about a fruit most people associate purely with vitamin C and immune support: oranges. But vitamin C's role in muscle health goes far beyond immunity. Vitamin C is an essential cofactor in the synthesis of collagen, the structural protein that holds your muscle fibers, tendons, and connective tissue together. Without adequate vitamin C, the connective scaffolding that muscle fibers depend on weakens, making muscles more prone to injury and slower to adapt to training stimulus. And here is what almost no one tells older adults. Vitamin C requirements may actually increase with age due to higher oxidative stress and reduced absorption efficiency. One orange will not transform your physique. But consistent vitamin C intake, paired with resistance training, has been shown to improve the structural quality of newly built muscle tissue, not just its quantity. Strong-looking muscle and structurally sound muscle are not always the same thing, and this is one of the few interventions that addresses the difference. Now we arrive at a fruit that connects almost everything we have discussed so far into a single, elegant mechanism. Papaya, like kiwi, papaya contains a powerful protein-digesting enzyme, in this case, papain. Papain has been used for centuries as a natural meat tenderizer, which gives you a clue about exactly what it does inside your digestive tract. It breaks proteins down into smaller, more easily absorbed fragments, reducing the digestive burden that becomes increasingly significant as stomach acid and enzyme production naturally decline with age. For someone over 60 eating chicken, fish, or eggs as their primary protein source, papaya can meaningfully increase how much amino acid actually gets absorbed rather than passing through unused. But here is the layer beneath that layer. Papaya is also rich in beta-carotene and vitamin A, both of which play a role in regulating satellite cells, the dormant stem cells that live alongside your muscle fibers and activate specifically to repair and regenerate damaged tissue after exercise. Satellite cell activity declines significantly with age, which is part of why recovery after a hard workout takes longer at 70 than it did at 30. Supporting satellite cell function is not something protein alone can do. It requires the specific micronutrient signaling that fruit like papaya provides. We are now 9 fruits deep, and a pattern should be emerging that most nutrition content never assembles into a complete picture. Each fruit is solving a different piece of a puzzle that protein alone cannot solve. Blood flow, mitochondrial cleanup, protein digestion, inflammation, electrolyte balance for contraction, fat-soluble vitamin absorption, suppression of muscle breakdown, collagen synthesis, satellite cell activation. And there is one fruit left, the 10th, and it ties every single one of these mechanisms together in a way that genuinely surprised researchers when they first studied it. Grapes, specifically the resveratrol found concentrated in grape skins, particularly in dark red and purple varieties. Resveratrol activates a set of proteins called sirtuins, sometimes referred to as longevity genes because of their role in cellular repair and stress resistance. In animal studies, resveratrol supplementation has been shown to improve mitochondrial density in aging muscle and enhance the muscle's response to exercise training. Some researchers describe this as exercise mimicry. Resveratrol appears to amplify the cellular signals normally triggered by physical activity itself, which means the combination of actual exercise plus resveratrol-containing foods may produce a response greater than either one delivers alone. This is not about replacing exercise. It is about ensuring that every rep, every set, every walk to the mailbox is met by a body fully equipped to respond to it. Now let us connect all 10 of these into a single coherent system, because individually each fruit is interesting, but together they form something far more powerful. Anabolic resistance after 60 is not one problem. It is several problems stacked on top of each other. Reduced blood flow limits nutrient delivery. Damaged mitochondrial energy production inside the muscle cell. Reduced digestive efficiency limits how much protein actually gets absorbed in the first place. Chronic low-grade inflammation tilts the balance toward breakdown. Vitamin D deficiency silences the muscle receptors that should be receiving the building signal. Declining satellite cell activity slows the repair process after every workout. This is why protein and exercise alone, while necessary, are often insufficient on their own after 60. They address only one or two links in a much longer chain. The fruits we have walked through address the other links, the ones almost never discussed in a typical conversation about muscle and aging: watermelon and citrulline. Reopen the delivery routes. Pomegranate and urolithin A clean out the damaged cellular machinery. Kiwi and papaya ensure the protein you eat is actually absorbed rather than wasted. Tart cherries and blueberries shift the inflammatory and breakdown balance in your favor. Bananas support the electrical signaling that makes muscle contraction possible in the first place. Avocado unlocks the vitamin D pathway that activates muscle receptors. Oranges reinforce the structural integrity of the muscle you are building, and grapes, through resveratrol, amplify the entire system's response to whatever exercise you are already doing. This is not 10 random suggestions. It is a system where each fruit removes one specific obstacle standing between you and the muscle growth your body is still fully capable of producing. Your muscles did not forget how to grow. They are simply waiting for every piece of this system to be back in place. And here is something that should change how you think about all of this entirely. None of these mechanisms require massive quantities. Researchers are not describing pounds of fruit. They are describing consistent, modest daily intake: a handful of cherries, half an avocado, a banana before training, a cup of pomegranate seeds woven into a pattern repeated day after day, month after month. The body does not respond to a single perfect day. It responds to a repeated signal sent consistently enough that it can no longer be ignored. So here is where this leaves you. The story you were told that muscle loss after 60 is simply inevitable was never the full picture. What was actually happening is that your body's signaling system became buried under deficiencies, inflammation, and absorption problems that protein powder alone was never designed to solve. These 10 fruits do not bypass that system. They repair it piece by piece until the signal your muscles have been waiting for finally gets through clearly. Again, this is not about chasing youth. It is about removing the obstacles that were never actually permanent in the first place. And once you start to see food this way, not as fuel, not as flavor, but as precise biological information sent directly to the cells deciding whether to build or break down, you stop asking, how do I stop losing muscle? And you start asking a far more interesting question. What else has my body been waiting for permission to do?